name is Taryn Comlo, and I'm going to present to you guys some comparisons of Old Testament burials and burials found by archaeology in the Iron Age. The question I'll be examining is, how does the archaeology of burial sites from the Iron Age relate to burial mentioned in the Old Testament? Some ways we can research this is by looking at the types of graves or tombs, provisions near or in the burial, and land geography. Burial practices reveal more about the living than the dead. Through this, we can figure out a lot, such as economy. But for now, we'll stick with comparing the Bible to actual evidence. You might ask, where can we start with this? On the map, I've plotted the 8 main types of burials in the Near East. Each color resembles a different type of burial. The 8 main types of burials that are found in archaeology evidence is simple or pit graves, cis graves, cave tombs, bench tombs, storage jars, anthropoid coffins, cremation burials, and bathtub coffins. Simple or pit graves is just a regular pit in the ground where a body or coffin would lay. It was dug into sand and normally held 1 to 2 or 3 bodies each. Gifts normally accompanied the dead. The areas where this burial was most popularly used was on the coast, Jezreel, Bethshean, and Jordan River valleys. The second type is cis graves. It consisted of a cavity in the shape of a rectangle lined with stones or mud bricks. Cobbles normally covered the floor, and a vaulted structure was above the body. These graves held 1 to 3 bodies. This could be interpreted as a more elaborate version of the simple grave. They occurred in less numbers but were more finer and had more precious items. They're employed in lowland areas, but none of these graves have been identified as at highland sites. Storage jars. They included a removable neck for the insertion of the body. These jars normally held 1 child, or 2 would hold an adult. These jars were in unmarked pits in the ground. They were practiced along the northern coast and through the northern valley. Anthropoid coffins were introduced by the Egyptians. Provisions and pottery and blades were included. These coffins were used in the pit and cis graves, as well as in the cave and bench tombs. Cremation burials had 3 types: pyre burial in sand, cremated bodies in urn or jar, and partially cremated remains in cave tombs. Bathtub coffin burials had a deep bathtub shape. In these coffins retrieved a assorted amount of bones, but they are interred in a simple grave or a rock-cut tomb, and they are found in places like Hazor and capital cities of Jerusalem and Amman. Bench tombs were used for single or multiple temporary burials, and Archaeology was for individual permanent burials. They appeared around 1200 BCE. They became the exclusive burial of highland Israelites. They consisted of oval caves. It included a rectangular doorway. An additional chamber was hewn to the back. Sometimes they would move earlier occupants' bones or provisions into the repository pit carved in the wall or under a bench. It's also very important to understand the diverse landscape of Near Eastern areas. The first one was highland. It consists mostly of cave tombs, bench tombs, or multiple families and extended family cave burial. The lowland consists of cremation into a simple or cis grave, anthropoid coffin, jar burials, or sometimes bench tombs. I made another map to examine the main spots where death and burial had happened in the Bible. Such places I marked were City of David, Hebron, Bethel, Samaria, Hammon Gog, the Kidron Valley, Shechem, and Jezreel. I then examined the provisions inside and around the graves, such as ashes, bones, the markers used to mark the bones, spices, ingredients, and ointments. These were all mentioned in the Bible, or the Old Testament. I also examined some keywords that stood out in the verses. So now that we have the basics down on archaeology and biblical burial, let's compare them. I began to make a map that maps the comparisons between both the archaeology and the Old Testament maps. The spots that were the same were Jerusalem and Jezreel. Let's look first at the location comparisons. 2 Chronicles 16:14 says they buried him in the tomb that he had cut out for himself in the city of David. Some keywords I found were buried, tomb, cutout, and the city of David. Cutout usually has to do with bathtub coffin burials or cave tombs, since they're in rock. Jerusalem is characterized as a highland land type. It is a lot of hills and valleys, and the map that I showed you guys before shows that there's archaeology evidence of bathtub coffins burials and cave tombs, which are cut out. 2 Kings 9:10 says, "As for Jezebel, dogs will devour her on the plot of ground as at Jezreel, and no one will bury her." On the map, a simple grave was found near Jezreel. Besides from some hills, Jezreel is relatively flat, and a simple grave would fit the land type of lowland burials. Another comparison is in 2 Chronicles 16:14, which says, "They laid him on a bier, covered with spices and various blended perfumes, and they made him a huge fire in his honor." Beginning in the 10th century, around the time of 2 Chronicles, new objects were found in Judah that included scented oils and perfumes. This was popular during this period where tombs were repeatedly entered and bodies were anointed by family and loved ones. 2 Kings 23:16-17 says, "Then Josiah looked around, and when he saw the tombs that were on the hillside, he had the bones removed from them and burned on the altar to defile it." This is pretty straightforward because the hillside and the tombs describes of cave and bench tombs. These are both examples of highland burials. Archaeological evidence shows that the earliest decorative and embellished carved headrests for the deceased came in the 10th and 9th century in the old city walls of Jerusalem. They are used to indicate a high status of wealth. King David reigned during 10,960 BCE. I feel they became popular because of King David. One would assume he initiated this due to his increase in income in the kingdom. The headrest would indicate high status of wealth. Last comparison I'll share with you guys is a verse that speaks of ritual of burial. Isaiah 57:7-9 says, "Upon a high and lofty mountain you set your bed, and there you went up to offer sacrifice. Behind the door and doorpost you have set your symbol." A mountainside indicates once again a highland burial. In this passage they are talking about tombs that are hewn, and a door which opens to a chamber for the deceased to rest. This description resembles a bench or a cave tomb. The symbol they speak about is probably a stele. The comparisons go on, but what conclusions can we make from these comparisons? Honestly, it's up to you to draw your own conclusions about the information given, but I believe the large amount of comparisons indicate that what is said in the Bible about burial is true and can be proven through archaeological evidence. I hope you guys